We put our energy towards adjusting the external circumstances of our lives. Things come together, they fall apart, they come back together, and so on. And we keep tinkering, but despite our best efforts, there always seems to be unfinished business. And then someone comes along with a teaching of meditation or Dharma, and we meet with a radically different approach to life. We stop trying to fix everything. We turn inwards and start to work with or play with perception. And then everything begins to change. Brought to you by Meditate with Ranga, Playing with Perception invites you to open to the theater of experience and play. That sounds great. What was it like being a monk in Sri Lanka in those days?
Oh, for me it was great. I mean, I stayed in this monastery, but the teacher let me go out and meditate in some forest and jungles. And I went on Pindapada, and I tried to live a traditional monk life to a certain extent. And I was practicing in, snake-infested caves and some forests, and just learning how to overcome death and discomforts, cultivating that simplicity, and that realizing that you can be happy without all the creature comforts of the world and all the problems that entails, and so on.
Did you feel fear at first when you had more of that like Dutanga forest cave dwelling?
Maybe a little bit in the beginning, but I was doing the certain types of meditation to help overcome that, like the contemplation of death and things like that, and just taking it as a challenge. No one was forcing me to do it.
Sure. I'm wondering if maybe you could explain that, how a contemplation of death might help ease the fear of the forest, of dwelling in the forest.
Knowing that, death can occur at any time. And, because of impermanence, kids die just coming out of the womb. In every increment of 1 minute, up to 102 years, people are dying from infinite number of reasons. Whether it's, genetic disorders, or it's accidents, or it's the way you're brought up, and this and that, or people live to be older, longer. Some people are sickly, some people have relatively good health. Every person is unique, and so just contemplating that and realizing that actually I had the perfect conditions to practice the Dhamma. That was one of the meditations from the Tibetan tradition that I really valued, is contemplating the value of having a human life, and a good human life, because a lot of humans that have miserable lives, especially back longer, further away, where life was very difficult, and so the amount of people that are born with the freedoms to not have to worry about getting food on the table, and having the freedom to study and do what they want, and travel, and to learn new things. A lot of countries don't allow that too much. Their own personal circumstances don't allow them to do that. So it comes down to a very small percentage of, like people. How many people decide to become a monk? Not very many. Out of 7 billion people on the world, how many monks are there? Probably less than 1 million. And so, anyway, just contemplating that and overcoming the fear of death. If it's time to die, okay, well, can I accept that? But you have to understand what would be holding you off from dying. What attachments and what guilt, worry, remorse, and fears have you cultivated that would make your letting go of this world more difficult? So the way Dhamma sees it, this life should be a preparation actually for death. But most people ignore it. They leave it to the last moment before they start thinking, oh, I could actually die. I give the simile, or the Buddha gave a simile of, the 4 thoroughbred horses.
Mm.
And a farmer has 4 horses. And he goes down to the horses are in a barn down at the bottom of a hill in his farmhouse. So he gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and his house door slams, and the first horse jumps up and says, "Oh, my master is coming. Let me get ready for the day's work." The other 3 keep sleeping. Then each time the farmer gets down closer to the barn and making noise, another horse wakes up, and the last one's still sleeping even when the farmer's inside the barn, and the other 3 have gotten up and they're still sleeping. And then he jabs him in the ribs with the metal gourd and only gets up, "Oh, today what should I get ready?" So people like that in the terms of preparing their mind for death.
Mm.
Like with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
First, there was a Chinese disease, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so people over here weren't worried, "Oh, it's not going to come to America."
Mm-hmm.
Then gradually, little by little, it started coming to America on the West Coast. And then still people were not worried, But little by little, it started growing, right?
Right.
And started their own family members now everybody's wearing masks and they're following all these protocols and people are dying, right? And it's coming down to, closer to them. Only then they start thinking about it, maybe.
Mm.
But one shouldn't wait that long to start thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's interesting how you bring like Maranasati, this mindfulness of death, as well as this Tibetan practice of dwelling with the preciousness of the human life, and bringing those 2 together as an asset for you.
Yeah, of course, we don't want to die.
Right.
But knowing that we can't really control it.
Right.
And there's so many different conditions that could cause death that we don't know of.
Mm.
Even very strong athletes have dropped dead on the floor from some genetic condition they didn't know about.
Right.
So, in fact, accepting that, if it comes, it comes. But would I be ready to let go of this world? Do I still have unfinished business, so to speak, that would cause me to have to come back and repeat the whole thing over again?
Mm. Yeah.
So that whole contemplation about the rebirths and so on. Of course, Westerners mostly don't believe in rebirth, so they may not see that as much of a thing, But even the idea of a Christian belief that they might go to a heaven or hell, that's a type of rebirth, but they don't consider it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it is from the Buddhist point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And it's dependent on your actions, right? The idea that if you break the commandments and lead an evil life, then you might get born, down there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Buddhists believe in that too.
Right.
So that's the whole idea about practicing Sila and to avoid those unfortunate circumstances.
Mm. Yeah, I'm curious to hear, since you mentioned Sila, if you could talk about the importance of Sila practice. It's interesting. I find growing up Sri Lankan, and if you want to take a break at any point, please let me know, Bhante.
It's all right.
We can.
I'm just trying to... Okay.
So, as a Sri Lankan Buddhist, right, I feel like I've seen many different archetypes of Buddhists. And I feel like one sort of archetype is the Buddhist who's really only focused on Sila practice because he or she may not believe that the deeper aspects of meditation are available to them. And then another archetype is one who's maybe really interested in reading about Nibbana or Sunyata, emptiness, these kind of deeper aspects, but hasn't quite given attention to Sila or the foundational practices. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about this.
Well, the Buddha taught the 4 Noble Truths, basically. Suffering, the cause of suffering can be brought to an end, and then the way to live, think, and meditate, it will help bring suffering to an end, to unravel the knots of karma in our mind, the inner and outer tangle. And that Eightfold Path is broken into those 3 stages of Sila, Samadhi, and Paññā, or morality, concentration, and wisdom. And as long as we're doing unskillful actions, the law of karma, like not living by the 5 precepts, these are the things that cause us worry, fear, anxiety, fear of getting caught for doing things, because even in most religions talk about precepts. Even in Christianity, they have the 10 Commandments, right? which are quite similar. So there's a reason for that. Because when you try to meditate, you get hit in the face with all the hindrances due to not living a skillful life and indulging so much and doing these kind of unskillful actions. And basically the law of karma is like the law of gravity. If you throw something up, it comes down. So in this way, in the sense, you could say the Buddha was like a scientist in a way. So the law of karma is like the law of gravity. If you throw something up, it comes down. So if you throw something out of your mouth, it comes back to you. If you throw something out of your body, like punch somebody, it comes back to you. If you throw something out of your mind, just like negative thoughts or hatred or loving kindness, then things will come back to you. And I like to then insert even Newton's law of for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you give out hatred, you're going to get hatred back to you. If you give out peacefulness and kindness, you'll probably get back that to you. And so the law of karma revolves around those kind of what I call natural laws. The natural laws. The Buddha didn't make that up. It's just these natural laws. So that's why learning how to moderate and control your actions of body, speech, and mind, these are what make our mind more peaceful, that eliminate guilt, worry, remorse, and fear, and also the repercussions that come back from that, having people looking for you to kill you or beat you for having slept with their significant other, or stole something from them, cheated them in a number of ways, and so on. I mean, people are living in so much fear, right?
Absolutely.
And so, therefore, that's why that comes first, is a foundation before really being able to gain deeper levels of meditation. Because the 5 hindrances will come up. It doesn't mean you have to have perfect Sila before you meditate.
Right.
But when you start to meditate and you see all the kind of thoughts connected with guilt, worry, remorse, and fear, or just the laziness of the mind, if the mind is full of negative emotions, it's not clear, and it affects the body, and you don't feel like meditating. So it just, so when you purify your actions and thoughts more, then the body becomes more, less of that heaviness. And so therefore you're able to sit more without thinking and worrying about those things. Today I haven't hurt a fly, so you have nothing to worry about.
That's beautiful.
And therefore you can gain concentration.
Right.
And then through concentration you gain the insights and develop the deeper levels of wisdom. So they go in that order. The Sila, Samadhi, and Paññā are developed in that order.
Right. But it's interesting, I find it interesting how you also mentioned that you don't need perfect Sila to do Samadhi or Paññā practice.
To get started, yeah.
To get started, right? And it sounds like in your story, you hadn't perfected Sila when you showed up at that retreat, but the strength of that experience, whether you want to call it Samadhi.
Well, we were supposed to follow the precepts when we came to
during
the retreat center, yeah.
Right. Sure, but maybe just before that retreat, would you say you had perfect Sila?
Oh no, because traveling in India, you had to tell lies, because otherwise you can't get by.
Right.
And I'd taken drugs because for 7 years I'd been a heavy hashish smoker.
Yes.
And drugs. And so actually when I went to the course, they told us don't bring any drugs, but I took my security blanket, a little piece of hashish, thinking, what am I going to do,
See, I asked that question because I remember you telling me this years ago. So my point is that...
But I forgot about it. I had it at the bottom of my pack, wrapped up. And I got so interested in everything that was going on in the meditation course that I forgot about it. And I realized I'm getting high off the mind. I don't need to get high.
Right.
That's what I learned from that.
Right. And I think that's a great point, because I feel like I have friends who don't think Samadhi is available to them because of their imperfections in their Sila practice, their virtue practice. But I would say if you want to meditate, still meditate, and who knows, maybe the strength of some experience will come back. And
Yeah, you will naturally, as you can still develop certain level of concentration without having, a purified Sila. That's a whole range there.
Right.
It's not that you're plotting out to go kill somebody or rob a bank, right?
Right.
But the ordinary person doesn't have all these kind of thoughts, right? They're just they might like to tipple a little bit or drink a bit. They might use bad language once in a while.
Right.
Just come and but most people are not going to go out and rob banks and kill people and do stuff that's really going to be on their conscience. So people, just moderate, the average person, they can start to meditate even without perfecting that. But at a certain point, you'll find that you'll get stopped. You kind of reach a certain point where you're doing all the motions of meditating, but it comes like reaching a dead-end wall, and that's maybe because of that imperfect, trying to clean up your sila a little bit more, like.
Right. And Bhante, why did you take the name Rahula?
Well, first, before I was to get ordained, I had gone to a monastery in Sri Lanka, Tapawane, and I had the inclination to become a monk, but I also had met a yoga swami and took a 1-month course in yoga even before I went to the Buddha Meditation Center. And I found a lot of benefit in doing the yoga, deep breathing, and this swami invited me to come to his ashram in India for a 6-month course. And so I went to that course, but I knew I wanted to become a Buddhist monk. But I thought I'd go to that course and learn yoga, and even my teacher, Buddhist teacher there, said, yeah, go ahead and learn yoga, it might be good for you. Thinking the physical aspects of it,
Yeah.
So I did that. And at the end of the course in India, in Pondicherry, the yoga teacher was giving people's Dhamma names, and he had asked me if I wanted to become a yogi monk. And I said, well, I already have my eyes bent on, heart sent on becoming a Buddhist monk. And he was kind of a little bit disappointed. But anyway, he gave me a Dharma name. But depending on your birth date, there's a whole science around giving names and birth dates. It's called the science of yantra, numerology. So according to my birth date, he said you should have a name with 2 syllables. And so he said Arjun, which is Arjuna from the Bhagavad Gita, right? And then Rahul, which I knew was Rahula, the son of the Buddha.
Right.
And he also knew that too. And so I said, you can choose these 2 names, but I know that you tend towards Buddhism, so you might like Rahula. I said, yeah, I'll take the name Rahul. But he was calling it Rahul, because in Hindi, they leave off the A a lot and just say like Rahul, or even Bud. They say, instead of Buddha, they might say Bud. But so he gave me the name Rahul. So then I went back to Sri Lanka, I went to the monastery, and then the monk there said, okay, you're going to wait a few months, you want to ordain me, and what's up there? And then when it got closer to the day, he said, well, we got to think of a name for you. And I said, well, I have a name. He said, what's that? And I said, Rahul. And he goes, Rahula? Yeah, okay, that'd be a good name for you. And then, in Sri Lanka, the monks take the name of their home village as a first name, and then like Tapawane Ananda or something, or Walpula Rahula. So then we got to think of a name for you, a first name. They said, oh, California Rahula. I go, oh no. I wanted to distance myself from that. But then he knew I just came from India and liked yoga, and I was very sincere about the meditation. He said, we'll call you Yogavacara Rahula. And that had a nice ring to it, I like that.
Right.
Yogavacara Rahula. And so that's how it came to be.
Wow.
And so my yoga teacher gave me the Buddhist name, and my Buddhist teacher gave me the yoga name. So it's kind of like was preordained that that's how my practice was going to evolve,
Wow.
integrating certain
Those two.
aspects of yoga with the meditation.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting how all these things kind of come together.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's really funny. Yeah, it's amazing how both those two aspects are together in your name and how each was given from a teacher from the opposite tradition.
Because when I came back to Tapawane, in the 3 months before I was to ordain, he asked me to teach yoga to the younger monks there.
Wow. Very open-minded monk.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's great. Do you have a favorite sutta?
A favorite sutta? Well, to me, they're all good, but there's certain phrases or stanzas that I like, and probably the one that the ones I recite more often are like the Sabbe Sankara Anicchati Yada Paññāsīha Pasati Atanibindati Dukkhe Esamago Visuddhaya, which means all conditioned things, and that means the 5 aggregates of clinging, are impermanent. When one sees this with the eye of wisdom, one becomes disenchanted with self-created suffering. This is the path to freedom. And the other one I like equally as much, even a more deeper level of wisdom, is that the world, the arising of the world, the ceasing of the world, and the path leading to the ceasing of the world is right within this 6-foot-long body with its nervous system, memory, feelings, and consciousness.
Two very beautiful and deep verses.
And also that mindfulness is the path to the deathless. Unmindfulness is the path to death. The mindful do not die. The unmindful are as if dead already. So those 3 are the ones I often recite the most. But that's too deep for the average person. That's pretty deep. But to me, that's the essence of wisdom. That's why the name of this place is the Lion of Wisdom. Because I like that name because that's what I focus on is developing these deeper levels of understanding that for the people that are ready for that.
And that second phrase that you used, is that I know the Buddha had said similar things a couple times.
That comes from the Rohitasa Sutta, a couple of suttas, when he was talking to the Deva Rohitasa.
This is the Deva that wanted to find the end of the world?
By running. By traveling.
Right.
And he went up to the Mahabrahma and asked him because he was supposed to have created the world, right? So he went up there and the Brahma says, "Shh, don't talk too loud, my disciples will hear you. I don't know where the end of the world is. Go ask the Buddha." So he came down to the Buddha, told him the story. And then the Buddha said, "You're not going to find the end of the world by traveling." And that's when he gave that verse.
This fathom high or this 6-foot high body endowed with mind. Can you explain that a little bit more, how we might find the beginning and the end of the world?
Because it arises in the mind. The world is a creation of our mind. It starts as a vibration, the subtlest vibrations in the nervous system. The 5 aggregate process is what creates our idea of myself in this world. Through the body, sensations, or body, feelings, perceptions, mental states, and consciousness. This is how the evolution of the mental process. You're sitting there and you feel the vibrations of the body. That gives rise to pleasant and painful sensations. Then you perceive them. The mind creates an object out of a vibration, like you hear a sound and you say, "Oh, that's a cat meowing. That's a teacher talking. That's a bird chirping. That's a dog barking. That's a door slamming." All these are mental pictures being created out of just vibrations. A baby doesn't understand that, but he learns that after he gets born, starts learning language, and starts identifying this vibration is a cat. This vibration is a dog. This is a bird. This is human. This is my mother. This is my father. And every single thing is you look at this, you say flowers. It's just a visible vibration that's striking your eye. But the mind creates the idea of a flower that stands out in time and space. Otherwise, you would have a one-dimensional viewpoint. It's perception that causes objects to stand out. And then the past and the future related to that object draws into play, which is the sankhara. And then the sense of I am, these are happening to me, the sense of I is there. And that I is identified with the body, feelings, perceptions, and mental states. Because we've been doing that since the baby lost that contact with the present moment. And we've been lost in the past and the future. So basically, I know it's a lot to digest. But so that's the meaning of, in yoga they call Maya, the world is Maya, illusion. And because look, this earth is not the world that the Buddha was interested in, or it was important. It's not the world. The world is created by the mind. Because look, an animal is on the earth, right? But they don't see what we do. Their minds are in a different world. They're in the animal world. And disembodied spirits, we go angels, devas, hell beings, they're in their own worlds. Or an ant. You think an ant has the same idea of this earth that we do?
Of course not.
No.
Yeah.
But they're on the earth, right?
Right.
But they're not in the world.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm meaning. The world is how our mind creates the idea of me and this world and so on. Because people can go into psychotic states too, right? In trances, when they think monsters are following them, they're lost in their minds. Right. So that's the world for them at that time. A person who's in a nightmare, right?
Right.
I mean, they're not on this earth at that point. They're lost in a mental world.
Right.
So that's what the Buddha meant by the world. The world, the way that the mind is creating our world from moment to moment.
Yeah.
You hear something nice or see a friend, and all of a sudden you get elated and be caught up in so much happiness, but then the phone rings and said somebody just got killed in an auto accident, and you can go boom, and go down into the depths of fear and that fast.
Right.
So that's the meaning.
Thank you, Bhante. My father taught me that sutta when I was quite young. It stood out to him, so I know he'll be happy when he listens to this that you brought that up. And it reminds me of another...
Which one? The one about the world, the beginning of the world?
Right, about this deva who's...
the Rohitasa. Yeah.
Rohitasa trying to find the end of the world. It reminds me of another sutta, very similar, where the Buddha says something like, he's talking to a group of monks, and he says, monks, if you were to travel in one direction for 100 years, you would not reach the end of the world. But if you do not reach the end of the world, you will not find liberation. Yeah,
you won't reach the end of suffering.
You won't reach the end of suffering.
Yeah, that was part of the same sutta.
Oh, I see.
I just didn't mention that particular part of it.
Oh, I see. Interesting. Yeah,
without reaching the end of the world, you won't reach the end of suffering. And then he said that's because the world, the beginning of the world, is right inside. Yeah. So in Vipassana, that's what we meditate upon. Actually, when I was first doing Vipassana, my first couple years as a monk, I was practicing this intense Vipassana meditation, and I reached, and I was just watching the world the world creation process. I even wrote that down in my notebook. Just watching the world being created moment by moment through sensation and through the five aggregate process. That was the focus. But most people don't reach that level because they don't do enough sustained practice to come to those levels. So when most people say they're practicing Vipassana, it's generally a fairly superficial level.
And do you have a leaning towards more Samadhi or more Vipassana in your practice? Like more Samadhi?
I don't make those divisions. Because there's three different levels of concentration. Momentary concentration, access concentration, and then the full absorbed concentration. And in Vipassana, we develop more of the momentary concentration. But concentration, to me, is the mind resting in the present moment without any hindrances. And that's the definition of jhana, right?
Mm-hmm.
5 hindrances aside.
Right.
And you have joy and happiness applied in sustained thought. So you could reach the same by practicing Vipassana, in my experience. And so, in understanding what the Buddha taught.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so we practice concentration because our mind is not concentrated. So we have to have an object to start with.
Mm-hmm.
So you might take the breathing, you might stare at a candle flame, you might just feel your hands touching together, something that'll kind of hold your attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so you stop, worrying about other things. And the longer you're able to hold the attention there, then the mind stops reacting to things. But you have to be mindful because you're going to, you're feeling itch and you want to scratch it, or you're moving because of pain. So there's so many, it takes a strong degree of concentration to ward off that.
Mm.
And if you're not mindful, you won't gain concentration. In fact, in all the lists of mental factors, the Eightfold Path, the 5 spiritual faculties, the factors of enlightenment, mindfulness comes before concentration.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's through the mindfulness that you're able to overcome the hindrances.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't overcome the hindrances, you're not going to attain the concentration.
Mm-hmm.
So by practicing mindfulness, in the way that I kind of advise people, is you're using the expanding and contracting movements of the breathing, and even doing deep, slow breathing, and that helps you to stay focused there in the body. And then you're not feeling just one point; you're feeling many different sensations. But it's all there in a very localized area. The mind's not wandering around, so it's still concentrated, even though there might be a number of things going on. It's still a much more concentrated state than your normal state.
Mm.
And it's enough so that the hindrances will also subside.
Mm.
And basically that's the present moment. When the hindrances subside, the mind is resting in the present moment, and that's a concentrated state. Objects are coming and going, but the mind is not moving. And that's where people get this wrong idea about concentration. They think it's being totally absorbed in one object, which is, one could do that, but I don't, from my understanding of Buddhist teaching, he didn't recommend that, or he might have in a few occasions, but almost at the end of every sutta, after he mentions attaining the first, second, and third, fourth jhana through practicing mindfulness, or just attaining, he says, now one bends the attention to overcoming the defilements.
Mm.
That means perceiving impermanence. Because the mind is clear enough there to see how quickly things are rising and vanishing, and to contemplate the 5 aggregates. You can't really do that if the mind is just totally absorbed in bliss and in quietness and so on.
Mm.
So the what is called the momentary concentration is, or being grounded in the body, is equivalent to the jhana. And when you're doing yoga exercise, you feel the piti and the sukha from doing yoga exercise too, and that's also the beginning phases of attaining those jhanas, is feeling the very pleasant sensations in the body and so on. And you can get that while doing yoga too. And then going directly into developing deeper insights without having to practice concentration as a specific kind of one-pointed practice, because that's much more difficult to do.
Right.
That's why a lot of people get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
But when you use the breathing and the body, and you have more things to notice, then it can be easier for people. Just being aware of sitting, breathing. You're not focused on one thing, but you're feeling that outline of the body, and the breathing is there in the middle, but you're feeling different sensations. And then you're noticing thoughts. When a thought comes up, thinking, you hear a sound kind of just come and go, But because of that anchor to the breathing and sensations, the mind doesn't chase them. And is able to then eventually reach this deeper, even to the fourth jhana level of just being aware in the grounded in the breathing body. That's what my sort of approach. Because look, we have this body with us all the time, right?
Yeah.
We have to carry it around with us 24/7, 365. How many, with the last number we don't know.
Right.
So why not use it for a good purpose?
Absolutely.
By staying grounded in the present moment. Because it brings so many benefits. And it's not that difficult to do if people just, take some training, but it's not that difficult to do. But the yoga practices dramatically help to increase one's chances, 100%.
Yeah, I find it really interesting how you mentioned using yoga, like doing the yoga movements, you can tune into Piti and Sukha in the body.
Because it's the prana, those subtle sensations that you're going. When you're doing something like this, you're breathing in, and then you interlock the fingers and you stretch the hands up. Wow, you can feel like electricity going all the way up through the body like that, And then you release and you go like that, and you feel this waves, like a rain happening inside your skull, in the body, a nice warm rain of just, activated life force. That means the oxygenated cells are vibrating, pulsating, interacting.
And would you describe Piti as like on the same spectrum as Prana?
It's an aspect of it, I would say. It's the life force, the subtle life force. Because it's present moment awareness. When you're feeling that, you can't be thinking about other things. So it's the present moment that is that vibration of the life force awareness.
Yeah, interesting. So I'm thinking tonight, if you're okay, we can do the chanting, that particular chant, because I remember you doing it one time at Bhavana Society in the dark and with the candle.
Well, there's different ways I do that chanting.
Okay.
One is where, like what I just did at the beginning of, tonight, that was just one round.
Right.
And done very slowly.
Right.
Other times, like on New Year's Eve, we chanted like 3 or 4 or 5 rounds of that chanting, maybe at a slightly faster chant space. But normally when I'm starting meditation, then I just do that one long one, because the long drawn out sounds, those syllables, is what creates a certain vibration, cellular vibration in the cells, because the cells of the body respond to sound. There's a whole science in that. And all the mantras and so on are based upon this kind of sound. So especially those low, guttural, long drawn out sounds like ah, ooh, it kind of relaxes the tension of the cells and relaxes the nervous system.
I have a thing in my personal practice with the breath where if it seems to pop up for a few weeks and then it'll go away for a few months and then it'll pop up again. Where if I involve the breath in, like, typically I take the whole body as the base of my meditation and tune into the subtle energy. But sometimes if I tune into the breath starts to feel really uncomfortable, like sort of like rigid. And then it becomes difficult for me to not think about the breath. And so I'm just sort of dwelling with an uncomfortable breath where it feels like my attention is making it uncomfortable. So I'm curious if you have any recommendations for that.
You just might not be used to it. I mean, when I do deep, slow breathing, until you learn how to do it, it may feel uncomfortable. But then you let it go, and then for a while, but it helps you to keep concentrated. So this idea that, it's still the present moment, it's still concentration, even if the breath is uncomfortable. You're feeling it, but it stops you from thinking about your girlfriend or other things,
Sure.
So, but then gradually it'll calm down. And it's just the present moment awareness. See, when you gain present moment awareness, it doesn't matter what is there, whether it's pain or it's bliss or anything else. None is equally important as anything else, because there's just empty vibrations moving through awareness, you know. So it doesn't really matter what is there. But generally, after doing a deep, slow breathing, then you let go of it, and then you continue to observe the breathing, but then it'll get, you know, finer and finer, and so on, and then, you know. But, you know, people talk about not controlling the breath. People control their breath all the time through their emotions and everything else. And,
right.
you know, deep, slow breathing is, you know, is the yogi's natural breathing. Because of that connection to the nervous system. You know, the slower you breathe, the more relaxed the mind is.
And I'm wondering, I understand you have a lot of videos of your yoga practice as well as your breathing exercises on lineofwisdom.org and on your blog. But I'm wondering if you could maybe briefly describe this deep, slow breathing.
Well, it means reducing your rate of respiration from the normal 10 or 15 times a minute down to just, well, you do it gradually, but say 5 times, 5 breaths a minute, 4 breaths a minute, 3 breaths a minute. And you have to do it gradually, because the lung is like a muscle like anything else. If you over exercise it too fast, it'll get sore like any other muscle. And so you gradually do it. But you want me to give you a demonstration of what a slow, deep breath is?
That'd be great.
Okay, so I'm going to... you may be able to hear the breathing as I'm doing, but it means drawing the air from the lower lung up through the middle to the top, because the lung, you know, when it expands, it goes all the way up here. But normally people don't do that. But in the yogic breathing, they do, because there's certain good effects of that. So I'm just going to give an example of that. So I'm going to go like this when I start the breath, and I'm going to go like this when I stop the in-breath, and then in one complete breath. Actually, you can count if you want to time it.
Okay.
If you have a timer, you can. I'm going to start the in-breath, and then I'll do that when I breathe out. So it's one complete in and out breath, to see how long it takes for just one in and out breath.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep. So that was about 32 seconds.
So that was 2 breaths a minute. That's real slow, but you know, that's not that difficult to do. But even if, I'll give you an example of, maybe 4 breaths a minute.
Okay.
You can time it again.
Sure.
Okay, I'll begin. Okay.
That was about 52 seconds.
That was 4 breaths.
Got it.
And for me, that's really, really easy to do.
Got it. So is there any pauses between the in-breath and the out-breath? Okay.
Usually, there's different breathing ratios in pranayama. You find a lot of different breathing ratios, and they all have a certain different effect on the mind and the body and certain organs and all that. But generally, what I learn and what I practice It's called the ABCs of breathing, or Savitri Pranayama, harmonious breath. So let's say if you're taking 6 seconds to breathe in, you hold the breath in for 3 seconds. That means half the time. And then you take 6 seconds to breathe out, and you pause 1 or 2 or 3 seconds before breathing in again. But holding the breath out longer is more difficult because the body will start kind of convulsing for air. So it's not that important. But so yeah, you hold the breath, gradually learn to hold the breath in longer, because as you hold the breath in longer, it gives more time for all the oxygen in the lungs to get out into the bloodstream. But most people just like, there's no time for the oxygen to get all used up, so they're breathing out wasted oxygen. But by like it feels so nice when you're holding in the breath, and you can't think while you're doing that because it's such a powerful, pleasant sensation. I mean, once you learn to do it, that's why you can't think about anything when you're doing that deep breathing, because it consumes all of your effort to do it, and it feels so pleasant that you don't want to think about anything else. And that's why you can gain concentration in the jhana by just doing that type of deep breathing. Buddhist monks will argue with me and say, no, but they don't have the experience, and so they just, that's what Sri Lankan monks equate yoga with Hinduism. Right. And so they think it shouldn't be practiced.
Right. I've come across that myself. So it's interesting. And for you talk about the pleasure of that, like the joy. I can sense that you can just get into that pleasure. In the beginning, if it feels kind of like contrived and sort of effortful, I'm assuming...
Well, it will be in the beginning, because just like anything, if you pick up a heavy dumbbell, you're going to think that's contrived and you can't do it either.
Right.
Anything new that you learn.
Sure.
Tie your shoelaces.
Sure.
Play an instrument. Somebody gives you a clarinet to play if you've never done it, But if you practice little by little,
So the pleasure comes with experience. And
well, as the muscles and you it becomes more easy to do.
Right.
As the muscles get stretched, it's easier to lift more weights. Right.
And would you recommend continuing that mode of breathing for the entire meditation set?
You won't be able to.
You'll be able to.
Just the way you can't just do 100 pull-ups, right?
Right. So do it in the beginning at some point.
Yeah, for 3 or 4 times. You get tired, stop, pause,
Got it.
relax, then come back again. Do it a few more times again. Stop, pause. Whenever you feel yourself getting a little anxious or straining, pause. And then little by little you increase the length of the breath. Now this video that I mentioned, I explain all that.
I see.
It'd be good to listen to that.
Okay.
And I teach people about breathing into each of the 3 sections, separately and then combining it.
Got it. Awesome. I'm definitely going to check that out. Last question on this before I move on. Would you recommend using that breath throughout daily activities?
No. But pausing whenever you think about it and taking 1 or 2 deep breaths, especially when you feel yourself getting a little anxious or moving a little bit too quickly, just pause and then. It's like getting injected with a tranquilizer. It's that fast.
Wow. Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Bhante. This has been a joy. We're going to move on to the next sort of section here, which will be the chant. Thank you so much for watching. And if you want to learn more and get some free resources, check out my website, meditatewithranga.com.